You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Comprehensive state privacy statutes converge around a portfolio of consumer rights that shift control over personal information back to individuals. These rights are modeled in part on international frameworks but are uniquely adapted to the U.S. legal and cultural environment. At their core, they include the right to know what data is collected, the right to access and correct that data, the right to request deletion, and the right to obtain data in portable formats. Beyond these, modern laws create opt-out rights for targeted advertising, profiling, and the sale or sharing of data. Sensitive categories of data often require explicit opt-in consent, particularly when children or teens are involved. Together, these rights transform privacy law from a theoretical obligation into a lived consumer experience, forcing businesses to build processes that respect individual autonomy and deliver transparency at scale. The right to know is foundational, requiring businesses to disclose the categories of personal information they collect and how it is used or shared. This right compels transparency by forcing organizations to explain what kinds of data flow through their systems, from contact details to geolocation and biometric identifiers. It also extends to disclosing categories of recipients, such as advertisers or service providers. For consumers, this visibility illuminates the often opaque world of data practices. For businesses, it requires detailed data mapping and disclosure processes, ensuring that public statements match operational reality. Inaccuracies or omissions risk enforcement as regulators view the right to know as the gateway to meaningful privacy control. Building on that foundation, the right to access specific pieces of personal information goes further by allowing individuals to request a copy of the data a business holds about them. This can include account histories, purchase records, or digital interactions. For organizations, fulfilling access requests requires secure retrieval processes and systems capable of collating data across silos. Identity verification is critical, as providing detailed data to the wrong person would itself create a privacy violation. Access rights underscore the principle that personal information is not owned by the business but entrusted to it, with accountability to the individual. The right to correct inaccurate data ensures that consumers are not disadvantaged by errors in records. Inaccurate information can affect creditworthiness, eligibility for services, or even employment prospects. Correction rights require businesses to provide mechanisms for individuals to submit updates and to propagate changes across systems and vendors. For example, if a consumer updates their mailing address, corrections should extend not only to internal databases but also to processors and third parties who rely on that data. Correction rights shift responsibility from individuals having to prove accuracy to organizations having to maintain accuracy, aligning fairness with accountability. Deletion rights allow consumers to request the removal of their personal information from business systems and, in many cases, downstream processors. This reflects the principle that individuals should not be permanently tethered to data that no longer serves a legitimate purpose. For example, a consumer may request deletion of old shopping history or account records. For businesses, deletion rights create operational challenges, particularly when data exists in backups or has been widely shared. State laws recognize this by including exceptions for legal holds, warranty obligations, or transactions still in process. Nevertheless, deletion rights emphasize that retention must be justified, not default. Data portability rights extend consumer control by requiring businesses to provide personal information in a readily usable, transferable format. The idea is to allow consumers to switch services without losing their digital history, similar to number portability in telecommunications. For businesses, this means developing export tools that produce data in structured, machine-readable formats. However, interoperability is not always guaranteed, and laws generally stop short of mandating universal technical standards. Even so, portability shifts the balance of power by enabling consumers to move between providers more easily, fostering competition as well as autonomy. Opt-out rights are central to modern frameworks, beginning with restrictions on the sale of personal data. Consumers can direct businesses not to sell their information to third parties, often through prominent links such as "Do not sell" or "Share my information." This right is especially relevant in industries that monetize data through brokers or advertisers. Related opt-out rights extend to sharing personal data for targeted advertising across contexts, reflecting concerns about pervasive tracking. Implementing opt-out systems requires businesses to re-engineer digital advertising workflows, often reducing reliance on third-party cookies and increasing reliance on first-party consent-based models. Profiling creates additional risks, particularly when automated decision-making significantly affects individuals in areas such as credit, housing, or employment. State laws grant consumers the right to opt out of profiling in such contexts, requiring businesses to provide human review or alternative processes. This acknowledges that algorithmic decisions can amplify bias or create opaque harms. Businesses must not only provide opt-out mechanisms, but also explain how profiling is used and what impacts it may have. Profiling rights embed fairness and transparency into the growing field of automated decision-making, recognizing that algorithms require accountability. Consent requirements are heightened for sensitive categories of personal information. This often includes biometric data, precise geolocation, racial or ethnic origin, health information, and children's data. Opt-in consent is required before such information can be collected or processed, reflecting the greater risks of harm if it is misused. For children and teens, verifiable parental consent is often required, and some statutes introduce opt-in requirements for teenagers themselves. This creates operational duties for businesses to design age-gating systems, parental verification processes, and clear disclosures. Consent rights underscore the principle that more sensitive the data, the higher the standard of consumer control. Implementing these rights requires robust verification mechanisms. Businesses must be able to validate the identity of the requester to prevent unauthorized disclosures or deletions. Verification standards may involve matching account credentials, requesting additional identifiers, or using multi-factor processes. At the same time, verification must not become so burdensome that it deters legitimate requests. Striking this balance requires thoughtful design, ensuring that rights are accessible without compromising security. Regulators emphasize that verification is not a technical formality but a core safeguard for consumer trust. Authorized agent submissions add further complexity. Consumers may designate third parties, such as lawyers or privacy services, to act on their behalf. Businesses must accept such requests if the agent can provide proof of authorization, often in the form of signed documentation. However, organizations may still require direct confirmation from the consumer to prevent fraud. Authorized agent mechanisms reinforce consumer empowerment but require businesses to design workflows that balance access with safeguards. Clear rules for documentation and verification prevent confusion and protect against misuse. Age-based consent standards build on federal law, such as COPPA, but extend protections to teens. States may require opt-in consent for processing data of consumers aged 13 to 16, ensuring that young users are not targeted for advertising without meaningful choice. This reflects a recognition that teenagers, while more independent than children, still require additional safeguards. Businesses must develop processes to distinguish age groups and apply tailored consent standards. Compliance in this area demonstrates sensitivity to vulnerable populations and reflects broader societal concern about youth privacy in the digital age. Household and shared account contexts create additional verification challenges. Privacy rights extend not only to individuals but also, in some cases, to households. For example, multiple members of a household may share a smart device that collects data, raising questions about who can exercise rights over that information. Businesses must develop processes to verify household requests without inadvertently disclosing one family member's data to another without consent. These complexities illustrate the evolving realities of modern data ecosystems where ownership and control are not always straightforward. Accessibility obligations ensure that rights programs are available to all consumers, including those with disabilities. Businesses must design request portals, notices, and responses in formats accessible to individuals with visual, auditory, or cognitive impairments. This may involve screen reader compatibility, alternative submission channels, or plain language disclosures. Accessibility requirements reflect the principle that privacy rights must be universally usable, not limited to those without barriers. For organizations, they also highlight the intersection of privacy with broader commitments to inclusion and equal access. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. State privacy laws specify not only the substance of consumer rights but also the processes businesses must follow when handling requests. Response timelines are central to these obligations. Most statutes require responses within 45 days, with a possible extension of an additional 45 days for complex cases. Organizations must inform consumers if an extension is needed and explain why. Tolling provisions may pause the clock while identity verification is pending. These requirements ensure that rights are meaningful, not delayed indefinitely. For organizations, timelines demand operational readiness systems must be capable of locating, reviewing, and producing data quickly across multiple repositories. Denials and partial fulfillments are inevitable in some cases. Businesses may deny requests that cannot be verified, that conflict with legal obligations, or that seek data exempt from deletion or disclosure. Partial fulfillment may occur when some data can be provided while other data must be withheld. State laws require that denials include explanations, often with references to the specific statutory exception relied upon. Providing clear reasoning prevents denials from appearing arbitrary and gives consumers a pathway to appeal. Transparency in denials strengthens trust even when requests cannot be fully granted. Appeals mechanisms are required in many state frameworks, offering consumers the chance to challenge denied requests. Businesses must establish accessible appeal processes, often with timelines for review and mandated communication of outcomes. For example, a consumer who is denied deletion because of a legal retention obligation must be able to appeal and receive a second-level review. Some laws also require that appeal outcomes be documented and reported to regulators. Appeals processes ensure accountability, making sure that rights are not blocked by frontline errors or overly broad interpretations of exceptions. Record-keeping is another compliance obligation. Organizations must track requests, document responses, and report on metrics such as the number of requests received, fulfilled, denied, or appealed. These records serve multiple purposes. They provide transparency to regulators, highlight trends that may suggest systemic issues, and support continuous improvement. For example, a spike in correction requests for a particular database may reveal recurring accuracy issues. Record-keeping thus transforms individual rights into organizational insights, reinforcing accountability and operational learning. Exceptions to rights requests are crucial safeguards. Organizations may retain data despite deletion requests if required by law, necessary for security purposes, or bound by contractual obligations. For example, retaining transaction records for tax purposes or warranty enforcement may override deletion rights. Similarly, legal privilege protects certain records from disclosure. Exceptions balance consumer rights with practical realities of business, legal, and security obligations. The key for organizations is to apply exceptions narrowly, documenting the rationale and communicating it clearly to consumers. Portability presents unique technical challenges. State laws require that data be provided in a format that is readily usable and transferable. This often means machine-readable formats such as CSV or JSON, but interoperability across platforms is limited. Security of transfer is equally important. Organizations must ensure that portable data is delivered securely to prevent interception. Some laws allow transfer directly to another service provider if technically feasible. Portability is not simply about moving data. It is about empowering consumers while minimizing new risks. Organizations must strike a balance between usability and security. Deletion exceptions highlight the balance between consumer rights and organizational needs. While consumers can request erasure, businesses may retain data under legal holds, for product warranties, or for ongoing transactions. For example, deleting records of an active order would undermine fulfillment obligations. Similarly, litigation holds may require preservation of communications. Organizations must maintain processes that flag data subject to exceptions, ensuring compliance with both privacy rights and other legal duties. Communicating these limitations transparently helps manage consumer expectations and prevent misunderstandings. Correction rights extend beyond internal databases. Once data is corrected, organizations may need to propagate changes to processors and third parties with whom the data was shared. This ensures that corrections are meaningful and not limited to a single system. For example, updating an address must extend to shipping vendors or benefits administrators. Contracts with processors should include obligations to honor corrections, reinforcing accountability throughout the data ecosystem. Correction propagation demonstrates that privacy rights are not symbolic but operationalized across the entire chain of processing. Global privacy control signals and similar opt-out preference mechanisms are becoming mandatory under several state laws. These signals allow consumers to express opt-out choices automatically through their browsers. Businesses must configure systems to recognize and honor such signals, reducing the need for consumers to submit multiple requests. Failure to implement recognition can lead to enforcement. This development reflects a shift toward technical enforcement of rights, embedding privacy into digital architecture. For organizations, honoring preference signals requires technical readiness and governance alignment with marketing and advertising teams. Do not sell or do not share mechanisms are also required in many states. Businesses must provide prominent links or buttons, often on website homepages, enabling consumers to exercise their opt-out rights easily. These links must be clear and accessible, not buried in dense policies. Some laws also mandate that these opt-out tools be free of manipulative design elements. Prominent placement ensures that rights are not theoretical, but practically accessible. For businesses, this requires both technical integration and user experience design aligned with regulatory standards. Dark patterns interface designs that nudge or trick users into consenting are explicitly prohibited in privacy rights frameworks. Regulators emphasize that consent must be informed, unambiguous, and free from manipulation. Examples of dark patterns include default opt-ins, confusing double negatives, or endless confirmation steps for opting out. Businesses must review their interfaces and consent flows to eliminate such practices. Compliance in this area is not only about avoiding penalties but also about reinforcing consumer trust. Clear, fair design supports the broader goals of transparency and choice in privacy frameworks. Rate limiting and abuse prevention are legitimate concerns in request workflows. Organizations must ensure that their request portals are not exploited for denial of service attacks or fraudulent requests. At the same time, safeguards must not unreasonably restrict legitimate consumer rights. For example, limiting request frequency to one per individual per year may be permissible, but creating excessive barriers is not. Fraud safeguards, such as multi-factor verification, further protect both consumers and businesses. Balancing accessibility with security is key to sustainable operations. Multi-state harmonization reduces complexity in managing rights across jurisdictions. Many organizations adopt unified request forms, disclosure scripts, and response templates that satisfy the strictest requirements. This avoids fragmented systems and simplifies training for employees handling requests. Harmonization strategies transform the patchwork of state laws into a manageable compliance framework. They also signal to consumers that the organization applies consistent privacy principles, regardless of residency. This builds trust and simplifies operations while still respecting state-specific nuances. Governance of rights programs requires structured oversight, training employees, maintaining audit-ready documentation, and embedding privacy into operations ensure that rights are handled consistently and lawfully. Governance may involve cross-functional teams, including legal, IT, and customer service. Audit readiness is essential, as regulators may request evidence of how rights are processed and documented. Rights programs must be more than reactive. They must be embedded in the organization's compliance culture. Strong governance demonstrates that consumer empowerment is treated as an ongoing commitment rather than an occasional obligation. Data subject rights and state privacy laws bring the abstract principles of transparency, accountability, and consumer control into daily practice. They compel businesses to build systems for access, deletion, correction, portability, and consent that are reliable, secure, and user-friendly. By documenting exceptions, honoring technical signals, prohibiting dark patterns, and harmonizing multi-state processes, organizations can transform compliance from a burden into a trust-building opportunity. Ultimately, effective rights programs ensure that individuals can meaningfully exercise control over their personal data while businesses maintain defensible, resilient operations in an increasingly complex privacy landscape. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.